Guitar Collector Guy presents Rescuing a Gibson SG from a Dead Robot. I like a good challenge. Recently I found, I believe, a 2008 Gibson SG special with robotic tuners and electronics. And the owner claimed that everything was dead in it. And so we negotiated a price. I got it for, a ridiculously low price because it was a non-functioning guitar. So I got it, and I kind of jumped to the simple kind of conclusions first. I tried to replace the batteries and charge them, things like that, and found that I could not resurrect it. So then the body on this thing is really, really nice. It's a nice guitar. And so I decided I had a set of Gibson Deluxe tuners. And I also, for about $25, had a Gibson wiring harness kit that I could easily put together a 1950s wiring harness and pull the electronics out of this, and basically making it a functional Gibson SG, just kind of a normal guitar without all of the fancy robotic stuff, and so on. And so that's what I decided to do. I had never taken one of these apart before, so it took me a bit, to be honest with you, to just figure out how to manually turn the tuners. You have to pull them out to disengage and then turn them so you can relieve the tension, and then remove the strings. The other thing is the bridge components actually have ribbon strips, wiring strips that go to them, that go down into a very, very complex wiring harness with a little CPU chip. And later on, I plan on digging through my parts and stuff like that and replace out the bridge components with a standard bridge. In the meantime, I disconnected the little ribbon connectors and fed them down through the guitar. In the beginning, I had problems taking the bridge off of the guitar. It seemed to be kind of secure. So all I did was just loosen the pulls, and then the bridge basically started to come off. And you can see, hopefully if my hand gets out of the way, you can see there I just took the little ribbon connector off, and the bridge components that are on this guitar now are just filled with electronic circuitry and so on, and really, really complex setup. I'm not, to be honest with you, really interested in the robotic guitars. A lot of people aren't. I like to just tune my guitars myself. I think it's a great idea and concept, and maybe at a later date, if somebody does it where the basic aesthetics of the guitar stay the same as an out-of-the-box, Gibson SG, I'd probably be supportive of it. And as long as this guitar allows you to tune it manually as well, but it's very clunky in my opinion. I'm not fearful about losing value on the guitar, and since it's not functional, I didn't really see it as a collector's item. And I am actually an electronics person, and I went through the circuitry and stuff like that, and just look for simple things, disconnected and so on, and I couldn't make it work. So I don't have any guilt about pulling the electronics out and replacing it with a standard Gibson set of electronics and tuners. So this was it was an adventure, and this video is me kind of taking you on that adventure and just kind of showing you what I ran into and how I overcame it, and so on. And I just printed out a really easy to follow circuit diagram for a standard 1950s wiring harness, and then that's what I built. The tuners are held on, if you just remove the nut and collars from basically the nut at the top, the tuners fall out. And then as soon as you remove all 6 tuners, the electronics module on the back of the headstock falls off as well. there were collars inserts inside of the headstock that fell out really easily. And once I removed them, it was a standard size tuner hole. And also, too, when I turned you can see me here removing some of the remaining collars. Most of them just fell out. The other thing that I was really, really happy to see, because I had actually watched other people's content on, doing basically what I'm doing here. And a lot of them had basically talked about the screw holes not lining up, but they were installing different tuners than the standard old-fashioned kind of Gibson Deluxe. And what I discovered was when I put those tuners on the headstock, the hole that was there actually did align. And so it really made the installation of these really easy, because all I had to do was put each of them in place, put the one screw in, and then basically go and install the collars and tighten them down, and then drill the remaining hole and put the screw in. And so the great thing about this is you cannot then tell just by looking at the headstock that it was modified. And I am very pleased with that, because I would have filled holes and try to repair it. This way I don't have to worry about it, and so it's pretty neat. And so now the guitar will have the standard Gibson Deluxe Clusen style tuners installed, which I really like these tuners, and I love the look out of them. Also, too, in the right of the screen, you can see the clear panel. It's much larger than a normal SG, and you can see all the different electronics that are in there. At the top of that panel, there's a white labeled thing, and that's actually the battery module. And then there's also attached to the one of the tone pots is a large electronics module and CPU, and it's how you basically control the tuning with this guitar. Also, the input jack is very different than a normal input jack, just in how it looks and inserting it. I was kind of worried about that, and I was worried that if I had to pull it out and replace it with a standard, that you'd be able to tell, by looking at the guitar. What I ultimately found out, though, was, as I was going through it, is once you remove all of the internal electronics, it's basically just a more modern version of an input jack. And I decided to just kind of leave it, and it actually works. The one different thing is once you installed the standard 1/4-inch guitar cable into it, it locks, and there's actually a switch on it that you have to depress to pull the cable out, which is actually kind of a neat feature to have. And so you can see here that I just kind of lining up each of the tuners with the existing holes, and basically tightening them down, and just basically installing the standard Gibson tuners into the guitar. So I found a drill bit that, when you put it up against the screw, was only as wide as the internal shaft of the screw and not the threads, which is really what you're looking to do. The other thing then was I measured the length of the screw and then compensated for the little bit of a gap that there would be as a result of the back of the tuner, and I marked off on the drill bit with blue tape so I wouldn't drill too deep and actually come out the other side of the headstock, which I've actually seen people do. And so it was an easy job. Just basically drilled out 6 screw holes, pilot holes, and then installed the 6 screws, and I was done. So as I said, the electronics built into this thing are fairly complex. I'm holding right now the battery unit that I actually replaced out. I'm pulling the ribbons out that originally were attached to the two different bridge components. And then you can see a large electronics component in the bottom of the compartment, and it's what's attached to the bridge tone. And so I went ahead and decided to kind of document the existing wiring that was in there. I was going to use the existing switch as well as the output jack, and then replace the 4 pots and so on. So I was just trying to figure out what the wiring was and so on. I was able to identify what was the neck pickup, and I put a piece of blue tape on that once I disconnected it, so I'd be able to identify it and differentiate the neck and the bridge pickups, treble and rhythm pickups when I went to install the new circuit into the unit. So I, again, just kind of went through and just kind of used a pair of diagonal cutters and diked off the little connections and stuff. Here's me taking a couple photos of the existing, so I'd have a reference in case I needed to come back to, and so on. And so, not difficult to remove. One thing that I would say is the knobs on the other side were cracked, so I didn't really care, about damaging them when I was taking them off, because I knew that I had a set of 4 that I was going to go ahead and replace them with. They were identical in aesthetic appearance as the original knobs that were on a standard Gibson of this type. So removing the existing electronics consisted of me removing the 4 knobs, removing the nuts that were holding the pots in place. I find these plastic shims are actually really great to use as kind of a leverage protection, so you don't damage the surface of the body of the guitar. And you can see in the bottom tone there's kind of electronics built into the cap. I just had to remove it, and then once I did, you could actually see a ribbon connected to it going down into the little brains module inside. And I just kind of I didn't really care about saving these, because it's not like I'm going to put them in another guitar or sell them to someone else. And so it was more or less just kind of a deconstruction of getting these parts out of the guitar. Whenever I bought pre-built harnesses, I actually save the templates that they come on, because they're a really great way of then at a later date building out your own wiring harnesses. And so that you can see that that's what I'm doing is I'll install the pots and everything as though it's going into the body of the guitar. And a Gibson SG, to be honest with you, and a Les Paul are not something where I would want to do the soldering inside of it's just more convenient to do them in this manner and, build out a wiring harness that actually works. Again, I found a really easy to follow 1950s wiring harness diagram online that I used for this. This was a really simple, I think like $25 to $30 just parts kit with CTS 500K pots and 22 microfarad capacitors and, the components. And I was just buying it because it's about the same price as buying all the components as a kit, what I discovered. And I always have a few of these around in case I have to do like a repair or if I'm doing a build out of something. And I save a lot of money by doing this. So for like $28, I get a 1950s circuit. Granted, it doesn't have like the bumblebee capacitors, but it functions just like a 1950s circuit and sounds comparable. And I get the pride of that I built it. And I've been long enough now, either making them or buying the pre-made where I know the kind of some of the ins and outs of putting them together. Like you can see a coil solid wire there that I've will wrap around the four pots as kind of a unified ground, bringing them all together and so on. And then the great thing about doing that too is once I disassemble or pull the nuts off to basically drop this into the guitar, the ground is rigid and it'll actually hold the four bots in exactly the position they're supposed to be. So it really makes it easy to drop them into the channel, compartment back on the back of the guitar. So granted, when I'm all done with this, there's going to be a lot of excess room on the back of the guitar, but I don't really care. That's fine. It's covered and so on. Here's the simple wiring diagram. And the great thing about this is if you have some fundamental basic soldering skills, this is not really quote unquote a schematic. It's a visual representation of what you're supposed to emulate. And it makes it easy to just follow and do exactly what you see in the picture in the diagram. And if you can do that and you build up your confidence and the quality of your harnesses is pretty good and they function and, you get better like I am. I'm getting better as time goes on. Then you can actually save quite a bit of money in building your own harnesses. And the really great thing is you can actually take the same set of components and do a multitude of different types of wiring styles. And so you can kind of change it up and see, what gives you the best tone out of your guitar and what you actually like. So I built out this wiring harness and the guitar at about 8:45 at night. I was by myself. My wife was at another location for work. And so I decided instead of watching television that I'd go out and burn off some energy doing this. And I knew I was kind of tired. So I just, to be honest with you, just kind of really took my time. Didn't try to rush things. Just tried to make sure that I did a good job. I did actually make a few mistakes when I was installing the wiring harness into the body. I actually misread the diagram and ended up ultimately desoldering some wires and then soldering them in correctly. And, but as long as you catch it and, you're able to fix and so on, ultimately the wiring harness worked and works great. And, and I'm really happy with the outcome. And I'm really proud, to be honest with you, that I was able to take something that was dead and kind of rip the brains out of it and stuff like that. And then put kind of a more analog approach. If I realize it's not, it's still electronics, but to me, it's kind of the old school type of approach in doing this and resurrect something that for all intents and purposes was non-functional. And in my opinion, a really, really pretty guitar and worthwhile doing something like this. So you get a lot of pride out of it. I probably will have to hang on to this guitar. It's not really a guitar that has resale value because of the amount of modifications into it. And also too, I'm not saving the parts that I pulled out of it. So, but that's okay with me. It'll just stay in my collection. And every time I look at it, I'll think, oh, that's really cool. It was dead. I made it work. So I rescued it from the grips of a dead robot. So I'm coming up to my 40th video that I will have published out on the channel. which I'm kind of proud of and really enjoying doing this. And my production skills keep changing. And one of the things I've had kind of a common comment that comes to me is the audio for when I quality of the when I'm recording guitar is just not that great. I've had some people think that it's the amp. What I've discovered is it's not really the amps, it's the miking setup that I'm using, and what I'm using to actually do the recording is not the best. So I'm actually feeding from a mic, a condenser mic, directly into the camera. And what I found out is you really lose a lot of the single signal, and the quality is depreciated greatly. It's great for a video, just voice, but it's not great for, recording some sort of an instrument. And so one of the things you'll see in this video and videos to come is I'll actually have a separate recording setup where I'm recording the audio and high definition, and then what I'll do is I will sync it back up with the video and drop it into the editing software that I use afterwards, and hopefully it'll kind of improve it and make the experience better, where you'll actually be able to hear kind of the tone and all of the components of that tone instead of what you've been hearing up to this point. What's funny is that I'm not the greatest guitar player. I really am not. I just really have a passion and love for guitars, and I'm Mr. Barchord, and so on, rhythm player. But I have noticed that people are right. Just the quality of the audio is horrible, and so hopefully it'll be a lot better from this point forward. If you like this video, click like, subscribe, and notify. So what you see now is the completed wiring harness, and I'm ready to drop it into the back of the guitar and start soldering all of the wires there onto this. And so it should go fairly quickly after this, but you can see the ground wire that I've got around the 4 pots. And as I said before, what's really great is once I remove then the nuts on the other side and pull this out, that very rigid wire will help keep the components together. So when I drop them in, they're not moving all over the place and stuff, and they'll literally just drop right in. And then I can feed them through the holes in the body of the guitar, and then put the nuts on and tighten them down so they're held in place before I do the soldering. So installing the assembled wiring harness in the back of the guitar is fairly straightforward. You have the 4 holes that are lined up. You want to put the 4 kind of spiked kind of washers, I apologize if I don't know the name of them, in place first. Move all the wiring out of the way so you can drop it in place, and then turn the guitar over while you're holding the harness or the pots in place, and put the washers on the top of the guitar and the nuts, and then tighten them down. And then you can move on from there, completing your circuit, matching the diagram with the wires that are there. And the most challenging thing of all of this was just me emulating the wiring for the switch. As I said before, I actually did find an error that I had made. As you should always, as you're going through this, take your time and constantly check your work. Make sure that you're doing, correctly. And luckily I was able to easily catch what I had done. And, I desoldered a few wires and soldered them correctly. I had mistaken wires, which I thought were grounds, and they actually weren't. They were actually part of the pickup wires that should have been soldered to post on the pots, and not actually soldered to the back of the pots as a ground. And if I had left it that way, I would have eventually found it, as I would have troubleshot, but the guitar most definitely would not have worked. But the cool thing is it wouldn't have damaged anything. It just, the great thing in most cases when you're building wiring harnesses and attaching them is they either work or they don't. Rarely have I seen something smoke and you destroy components and stuff like that. But I guess it's possible. But I haven't had that. It's just they're dead and you have to figure out why, and then it's not. Okay, so if you look here, you can see the different style of output jack that I was describing with a little switch on it. And I decided, to be honest with you, just leave it there and use it. It's actually a really nice output jack, and I couldn't find, that there was actually electronic circuitry and so on in it. And, when I finally able to test once I was done and then use it, it works great. It just works like a standard output jack. So here I'm putting the washers and the nuts on the short shaft pots. And when you're buying kits that are either pre-made or one you have to assemble, you'll actually find there's either short shaft pots or long shaft. And usually flat body guitars like an SG take the short shaft. Guitars that have kind of a curvature to them more than likely will take the long shaft. To be honest with you, the long shaft will actually work in both. The only difference is it'll look kind of a little bit goofy if you hold it and look at it from the side, because you'll have a lot of clearance between the knob and but it will actually work. There's no difference in the internal circuitry. It's just the length of the shaft. You can always Google online with your guitar, and the question of what type of pot shaft does your guitar take, and you'll find in forums and things like that there's lists and tables that will actually tell you your model of guitar with the length of the shaft that you need to use for your guitar. here's what I would call the moment of truth, where I install everything and then I actually do my first test. One note, you can see the holes in the body of the guitar. The bridge components will actually cover those and you won't be able to see them when you're done. So what I'm doing here is I've plugged the guitar into an amp, I turn all the pots up full, and then I just toggle through. Right now I have it in the middle position, so both pickups should be functioning, and I take just a small screwdriver, and as I go to each of the pull pieces, I hear an audible pop on the amplifier. And I'm just going to check the bridge. And so I'm in that position. I go center, make sure it works there. I want to make sure it's off when I moved it into the up position. Same thing, so you just basically check the functionality overall. And it's a really good indication that more than likely, basically the pickups are wired and the wiring harness are wired properly. And the pickups are actually then functioning as a little microphone. And, what you're doing is almost like taking your fingers and tap on a microphone. The other thing is I think this guitar was in storage for a really long time. And I have to tell you, I have not seen a fretboard this dry in a really, really long time. And so I put, kind of copious amounts of conditioning oil on it and then just rubbed it in with my hands and then removed any excess. And it so improved the look and everything of the fretboard and the guitar itself, and just kind of made it, beautiful the way. And there's a lot of really nice grain and streaks, within the rosewood. So next I just installed new strings. Nothing unusual about that. And then I'm going on, and I'm really kind of at this point getting excited because I'll be able to plug it into the amp for the first time and see if it's actually working the way I want it to. So something really important, and I've talked about this before, when you install strings specifically, well, it's always important to stretch your strings, but really important to stretch your strings after you've installed them on kind of standard tuners with winds. You really need to tighten the winds. Also, too, I've had a lot of comments about me not tuning the guitar in the playing position, which I actually really do, but I got lazy in the videos, and so I would just leave it laying down. I really haven't noticed that much of a difference between, but for the sake of reducing the amount of comments and increasing my credibility and my abilities, I've decided to start showing the right way of doing this. And so here I am tuning the guitar, kind of initial tuning for bass line. So next, I threw a capo on the first fret. I depressed the string, the low E string, and then put the feeler gauge in at the 6th fret and measured the gap between the low E string and the top of the fret, and it was perfect. I did not have to do any adjustment to the truss rod, which was nice. And the next thing that I did was I measured string height, and I really expected to have to change something because I had actually changed the height of the post. And what I actually discovered was it was actually spot on. And so I didn't have to change that at all. like this video, click like, subscribe, and notify. Thank you for watching Guitar Collector Guy. Really appreciate you being here. Hope you come back and watch more.